Christof who is from my sort of background, one of the founding members of the Urban Collective, or I think there are 7 architects in Raumlabor, but now also teaching at Bergen School of Architecture. So that was our excuse to include Christof in this essentially Nordic concept of a panel, but perhaps bringing some of his experience as a freelance or an independent thinker and producer and actor on this on the urban scene. So thank you very much for joining us, Christof. At your screen, but now we are seeing wenn de Systemdialog erscheint, link offen anklicken.
Can you see my screen?
We can see Realtopias on the left, and we can see you on the right, and a group of people standing also. Yes?
Okay, so maybe I take down... anyways, yes, hello, my name is Christof Meyer. Hello, Kjell. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having me as part of the Nordic Urban Lab. As you can see, I titled the presentation with Realtopias as a frame to talk about our work. And I think I speak a little about our group. Raumlabor has emerged as a group in 1999. But most of us already met before in the 90s when we were all studying architecture. So I would say that the post-war time in Berlin was a common mindset that we had before we started our practice.
So just a short note, we have two slides up and they're separated. I'm not supposed. Is that how it's supposed to be?
So
maybe you just need to change the view.
Yeah, that's true. So I had, sorry. Where do I get this? Okay, let's try again. Now better?
This is fine. This is fine. Yes, thanks.
But now you see one. What do you see now?
Now we see one, yeah. And I see one with Raumlabor and 7 figures in front, and just your slides on the left. So you just want it full screen. That's it. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So like I was speaking about Raumlabor as a group, and that we all have a kind of a background in architecture. And I think as a base of working together, an extended understanding of architecture or of space as a result of social interaction. And we always say that our work is situated between architecture, art, and activism. And we kind of find a way to frame this as urban practice. So because I was like conflict, what are you doing? What is your kind of practice about? So urban practice is a good way to speak about what you're doing. Going back to this kind of paradox term of real utopia, which comes from the sociologist Eric Olin Wright. So he's American. And I think he looks at utopia as something here and now, as a situation of taking action and creating imagination as a condition of learning and as an ongoing process of shaping the future. And I think this is kind of a nice way to describe what our goal with urban practice is. So I'm starting to speak about, I think it was one of our first, maybe specifically the first commission, early 2000, about Halle Neustadt in East Germany. And it was about the concept for a shrinking city. And maybe just some words about the background. I think after the reunification, a lot of specifically East German cities had to face a loss of inhabitants due to this kind of change. And I think you could see this as a, or like Halle Neustadt to see as a representing a situation of a failed vision of socialism and modernism. So as a wider context you had to work with. And on the other hand, I think it was really a challenging situation as architect to work within this kind of taking things away, because as an architect you were kind of trained in adding things, and so I think architecture and urbanism is mostly about growth and not degrowth. And I think this was a really interesting or kind of important experience in learning that we had with our first commission. And then I think along with this commission, I think it was interesting that we, along with the study, we had the chance to work for a theater production in Halle. And we used this to set up this kind of whole festival in one of the, this is like the center in Halle with the 4 tower blocks that were all empty at the time. And we used the festival in Halle to kind of inhabit one of the empty kind of slabs, and framed the whole festival as a hotel, as a kind of an open, hospitable situation to invite people, not only guests for the festival, but just neighbors, people living there. And the whole hotel was run by teenagers from the community. And I think it was kind of interesting for us to find out as a learning anchor that it could be really productive to combine like urban research along with artistic practice, and to work and experiment and really test, create testing situations that were never allowed as an urbanist. So just to make it short, I mean, we found out that the study was commissioned by the city, by the Benning municipality, and then we got the cultural funding for the festival, and using this as a kind of testing situation in one-to-one to see if our urban concepts, how they kind of have a result on the kind of on real life. And what you can see here, it's kind of a nice photography, seeing that a lot of things is going on the facade by people using it again. We only could use like the lower part of the slab. So, and I think in the further practice, we use this as a kind of strategy to kind of develop our project. I mean, for example, this like the kitchen monument that you can see here, along with the Space Bust and other similar projects, that we conceived it as a kind of relational object, and it was firstly commissioned by the festival, and it turned out to be a really kind of a powerful tool, and it could be used as a what we call a relational object in different contexts, and we always speak about negative form, that it's not only about like the object as a design, but the active form that produces a lot of kind of interaction. What's interesting that this kind of, what I say, tool kind of really responds and works in various contexts, and always creating a kind of a sort of safe space, safe atmosphere for interaction. And on the other hand, we always kind of frame this as a kind of interesting relation of guest and host situation, because usually we are invited, we are kind of a guest in different kind of situations, but at the same time we invite people to work with us in these kind of conditions, and these people are local, so we become the host again. And another important thing is that this is what I want to say, this object as an active form, it comes not as an object to look at, it comes as a kind of safe space to work with people, and to create different forms of interaction activities, common cooking. But this is probably mostly coming from the people we invite to work with us. Jumping back to Berlin, where we did a study commissioned by the Senate of Urban Development about the future of the Tempelhof Airport that you can see in the center. We were commissioned at a time when the market was kind of relaxed and there was apparently no investors coming up to spend or invest any money on developing this. But then after the financial crisis, which to my perspective was a really turning point in Berlin, the money came back to the real estate market, and our study kind of was archived, and they wanted to go back to business as usual. But this kind of experience was for us the frame to work with Tempelhof and around Tempelhof. And I'm speaking about two projects now. One is on the, can you see my mouse? No, you can't. One is on the right-hand side, it's a former cemetery, and one is on the very top, it's a water collection basin. Starting with the project here, it is a kind of incremental project that started in 2014 and developed in several steps until 2018. We framed it in the end as Cope Campus. This is how we started as a festival center for 48 Hours Neukölln, which is not festival, but the whole festival was there for, the center was there for a whole month. And we used this as an invitation for the people from the neighborhood to kind of appropriate the structure in different senses, to discuss their needs, to speak about their neighborhood and the developments and changes that has been going on in the last years. And based on this, we started a project on the cemetery next to the cemetery. There are a lot of cemeteries in this area, and this started in 2015 along with the kind of so-called refugee crisis. We call this like the Green Nursery, and it was mostly conceived as a school, as a place to learn. It's not only like us them learning from us, but us learning from them, and the place itself is a kind of a learning place shaping by the knowledge we kind of get from our kind of day-to-day action and everyday kind of learning. An interesting thing was like a format that we called Café Nana, which was conceived as a format that we invited back the neighborhood. This is how we started with the former festival center. And this was kind of hosted by our participants, and to give them a kind of feeling of ownership and responsibility. And this was a kind of very successful format to bring in people from the neighborhood, from the local areas, to work with us on this project. In the next step, we expanded the project into a kind of garden, and this is where the further idea came in to develop an urban area or urban neighborhood, a new neighborhood, which was a plan for this kind of empty area, based on temporary activities. And I think this is like an information we took from the think tank that we did on the Tempelhof Airport. So this is like the next step we took, a greenhouse that we kind of were planning as a Trojan horse to make a first pavilion on the urban development. This was our kind of plan. Here you can see like a diagram that came from the urban study on Tempelhof, where we always kind of were exploring the role of temporary use. And there are kind of three different paths, like the 4A is like it's like the interim use, where it's mostly, which is the way how this kind of interim use is mostly used, and then the B is like a kind of peaceful coexistence in the future, where like the new developments come and the old, like the interim use remains. And the last part, and this is what we were kind of aiming for, like that the urban development comes as a result of this kind of interim use. And I think this is really important to reflect, because I think these tools of activation have become a kind of a common tool in urban planning. So we always have to be aware what's on stake and what you're doing if you have the chance to use things temporarily. Just an image from the inauguration, where kind of were not finished, but kind of was the time for this fest. And then well, you can see that the greenhouse was not used as a greenhouse, it was more conceived as a kind of project space, as a public space for people from the neighborhood. And this is why it actually had to stop at some point, because the permission, we had to ask for permission, was kind of based on using as a greenhouse, and we wanted to make this kind of under the radar, but this was kind of a difficulty. That's why the whole project in this way ended in 2018, and it was took over by a kind of urban gardening group in the neighborhood, which is still fine, but to some extent I would say it's kind of a fail, but it was a learning outcome which kind of could be helpful in the future. Jumping to the next project, which is the floating university, and it's as well part of the former Tempelhof Airport. It's located in a former rainwater collection basin, which was part of the infrastructure of the airport. And after the airport closed in 2008, it was not kind of maintained that well, so that it developed as a kind of biotop for birds and insects and other kind of animals. And we were kind of working for, I think, 3 years to get everything together, to get the permission to use that site, to get the funding from different cultural institutions. So the whole project was kind of self-commissioned, if you want so. And I think it's interesting to speak about this part, as this was addressed previously. So we used like the culture in our funding in Germany, where you have a lot of institutions that kind of fund projects like this, but you have to frame it specifically, and we kind of conceived this as a kind of experimental arrangement to speak about urban routines and to see it as a kind of experiment of transdisciplinary learning and research. And in the focus was the question how cities could work with contemporary contamination and risks of climate change and the scarcity of resources, and what kind of challenges are within this kind of development. A part of the structure was a research on how we could use rainwater, that you could see here. There was a kind of a tower. But we not only had this kind of school as a kind of, along with the kind of auditorium, we had a lot of other infrastructures like a kitchen to use the building together, a bar for kind of exchange, and of course, expanded toilets and sanitary tract. And during the year 2018, we kind of invited a lot of international schools and universities to work with us, to come temporarily and use this kind of situation as a collaborative format. And we did it again in 2019. This year we had to stop for, not only for Corona, but the financial situation was kind of difficult, as this is mostly the part of this project that we kind of do, that getting them funding is a big part, and it's always like a major kind of time-consuming part of our work. And I think this specifically shows that the what we call utopias are really kind of fragile situations, and very often kind of precarious situation, which might be a productive approach in taking actions, but it's very difficult to kind of create this kind of continuity. I think, thank you. I hope I'm still in the time. I don't know, I was a bit rushing in the end, but I was a bit afraid to spend too much time in this kind of conference format.
Thank you, Christof. That was really very good, but succinct, and I think it really focused on some important aspects. Maybe there's a couple of minutes. I don't know if there's anybody who wants to put their hand up and just flag in or write in the comments and chat. area? Not yet. But when you're just ending where you're saying, yes, they're very fragile, these Realtopia projects, especially on the scale you're working on. I mean, these projects are not micro anymore. They're quite large scale in a way. They really do. And the scale is important, of course, to actually, it is on the scale of the city. It's not just a backyard anymore or something which is for a weekend. But do you see these as, I mean, who actually, this last project, runs that? Do you go in as a, not just creating it and guiding the process and providing the knowledge to do these socially engaging design, co-design process, but you actually go in and run it, or do you find people who run it? And that's one of the issues, I suppose. Nobody takes over. I suppose that's one of the problems, or?
Yes, I think this is a crucial point. But in this case, I think so far it's running or kind of developing quite successfully. We kind of funded an association where we are still part of, but we can like stand back after a time. And yes, of course, I mean, you say it's not the backyard anymore. It's like I was kind of picking up the bigger kind of projects. And as you could see there, both the last two ones are in Berlin, where it's kind of possible for us to do projects like this, whereas kind of smaller projects could be done like in different places, because it's a kind of a limited time where you can spend or you can come back in regular kind of time frames to kind of create this kind of continuity. But I think the continuity is one aspect that we are interested in, and it's so difficult to kind of come to a situation where this kind of works and walks on its own, because cannot operate many of these projects for too long.
No, okay, thanks.